He survived because he did not move. Not because he was faster, braver, or better trained than the men around him, but because on Omaha Beach, in the first terrible hours of D-Day, movement could be the thing that killed you. The soldier in this story lay flat in the wet sand, trapped under the dead, with a helmet pressed near his face and bullets cutting so low over the beach that the air itself seemed dangerous. He could hear men crawling. He could hear men calling for medics. He could hear the water pushing closer behind him. But the only rule left in his mind was simple enough to fit into 2 words: stay still. This account is told through a fictionalized composite soldier, drawn from the kinds of experiences recorded by men who landed on Omaha Beach. His name here is Samuel Hale, but the fear, the beach, and the impossible choice belonged to many men that morning. Samuel had not imagined war as a place where doing nothing could become an act of survival. He was 21 years old, a private in an American infantry unit, and by June of 1944, he had already learned how to clean a rifle in the dark, how to sleep in wet clothes, and how to pretend a briefing map made the future understandable. In England, officers had pointed at sand tables and aerial photographs until the invasion seemed like a problem of distance and timing. The men were told where the obstacles would be. They were told where the exits off the beach were supposed to open. They were told naval guns and bombers would weaken the German positions before they arrived. Samuel listened, wrote short letters home, and tried to believe that the men who made the plan had seen something he could not see. If this kind of history matters to you, a quiet like or subscription helps keep these stories in front of people who still care about them. For Samuel, the story did not begin with a flag or a speech. It began inside a landing craft, with salt water in his boots and the shore still hidden by smoke. The channel crossing stripped away much of the confidence men carried onto the boats. Samuel stood packed shoulder to shoulder with other soldiers, too crowded to sit properly, too sick to care how he looked. The landing craft rose and dropped in the rough water, and each drop made the metal ramp ahead of them shudder. Some men prayed with their eyes closed. Some checked the same ammunition twice. Others stared at the closed ramp as if it were a wall between one life and another. Samuel remembered the smell most clearly: fuel, vomit, wet canvas, oil, and fear held inside metal. Nobody could see Omaha Beach clearly yet. They could only hear the deep sounds from shore, the distant thump of guns, the broken thunder of shells, and the sharper cracks that told them the Germans were still firing. Every man had been trained to move forward when the ramp dropped. No one had been trained for what it would feel like when the whole beach seemed to fire back at once. When the ramp fell, the world in front of Samuel did not look like the photographs. It looked lower, darker, and more crowded with death. The water was deeper than some men expected, and the sand beyond it was not open ground but a long killing place broken by obstacles, wreckage, smoke, and men already down. Samuel stepped forward because the men behind him had nowhere else to go. Cold water hit his chest, then his throat, and for a moment he was not a soldier at all. He was only a young man trying not to drown under the weight of his own equipment. A man beside him disappeared beneath the water before Samuel could understand what had happened. Another lost his rifle and reached for it as if losing the weapon meant losing himself. Samuel pushed toward the beach because stopping in the water was impossible. Bullets struck the surface around him in fast, angry lines, and every splash looked personal. The first yards across the sand were not a charge. They were a breaking apart. Men ran, dropped, crawled, turned, froze, and were forced forward by the men still coming behind them. Orders vanished inside the noise. Samuel saw a sergeant waving one arm toward the shingle bank, but he could not hear a single word. He followed shapes instead of commands: a helmet, a pack, the back of a man from his squad, a rifle held above the water. The beach had no clear front and no clear rear. It was only open space under fire, and every step seemed to ask a question no one had time to answer. Samuel reached a patch of wet sand near a steel obstacle and threw himself down because everyone else was down. He meant to rise again. He meant to crawl. He meant to do what the training had told him to do. Then something struck near him, hard enough to turn the morning white. He did not know at first whether he had been hit. That was one of the cruel things men described later, the few seconds when the body refused to explain itself. Samuel could feel sand in his mouth and pressure across his legs. He could move his fingers. He could breathe, though each breath came shallow and sharp. His ears rang so badly that the battlefield seemed underwater. When his sight cleared, he saw a rifle lying inches from his hand and a boot beside his shoulder that was not moving. A fallen man had come down partly across him, pinning his lower body against wet sand and twisted straps. Samuel tried to pull free, but the smallest motion lifted his shoulder just enough to draw fire into the sand beside his face. The message was immediate. The beach had seen him move. He stopped, and the firing moved on. That was the first time Samuel understood the awful protection around him. It was not cover in the way soldiers meant cover. It was not a wall, not a ditch, and not a crater deep enough to hide inside. It was the confusion of the beach itself. Fallen men, packs, helmets, smoke, and torn equipment had made him look like part of what had already happened. If he struggled, he became a living target again. If he stayed flat, he might disappear inside the wreckage of the first wave. The thought was so horrible that he pushed it away, and then it returned because it was true. Several yards ahead, a soldier lifted himself on one elbow and tried to crawl toward the shingle. A burst of fire cut the sand around him, and he dropped back down. Samuel felt his own muscles asking to run, to drag, to do anything except lie there. He forced them not to answer. Minutes on Omaha Beach did not pass like normal minutes. They stretched, broke, and returned in fragments. Samuel watched boots move through smoke. He saw a medic bend over a man and then flatten himself as fire swept across the sand. He saw the tide touch equipment that had been dry only moments earlier. He heard men calling for help from places he could not safely look toward. A landing craft burned behind him, sending oily smoke across the water. Shells landed farther up the beach, shaking the ground under his chest. Sand struck his cheek in small stinging bursts. The war around him kept producing things he wanted to react to. A hand dragging through the sand, a helmet rolling in the wash, a voice calling a name again and again until the voice gave out. Samuel wanted to wipe his face. He wanted to lift his head. He wanted to see where his squad had gone. But wanting was not permission. The hardest part was not only fear of dying. It was the shame of surviving in a way that looked like surrender. Samuel had been told that courage meant moving forward. He had been told that the beach had to be crossed, that men had to get off the sand, and that hesitation could destroy the whole assault. Yet his body had learned a different lesson in a few brutal seconds. Forward was death if he rose too soon. Backward was water and more fire. The only narrow chance was stillness. He began to measure survival in tiny denials. Do not cough. Do not turn. Do not answer. Do not reach for the rifle. Do not push the dead man's weight away. He pressed his face into the sand and breathed through the side of his mouth. The beach around him kept moving, but Samuel made himself into something the enemy would not notice. Then the tide began to change the rules. Water that had seemed far away started creeping between the bodies and packs around him. It darkened the sand near his hands. It touched the strap across his leg. Samuel understood that stillness could save him from bullets and still kill him another way. The thought gave him a new kind of panic, quieter and worse than the first. He tested his leg again, not with a full movement, only with slow pressure. The fallen man's weight shifted a little, then stopped. Samuel waited, letting another burst of fire pass overhead. He tried again, moving less than an inch. The strap tightened, then loosened. Pain shot through his hips so sharply that he almost cried out. He bit down on his sleeve instead. The beach did not need another sound from him. By late morning, the shape of the fighting changed enough for men like Samuel to risk becoming alive again. The fire was still there, but it no longer seemed to strike every movement at once. Smoke drifted thicker across parts of the beach. American soldiers had begun to gather beyond the worst open ground. Some were crawling. Some were dragging weapons. Some were carrying men who could not carry themselves. Destroyers had moved closer to shore, and their guns were hammering German positions with a violence Samuel could feel through the stones. Engineers were cutting paths through obstacles and wire. Small groups of soldiers were forcing their way up from the beach in places that had not looked passable on any briefing map. Samuel did not understand the larger battle, but he understood one thing. The machine gun that had owned his patch of sand was no longer watching it the same way. He waited until he saw another soldier move near the obstacle and not fall immediately. Then he pulled his trapped leg free, inch by inch, with the patience of someone opening a door beside a sleeping guard. He did not stand. Standing felt like an invitation. He crawled, dragging himself over wet sand, past a helmet with no owner he could see, past a pack spilling letters into the mud, past men he could not help and would remember because he could not help them. The distance to the shingle was not far on a map. On that morning, it was a country. Twice he stopped because fire snapped across the ground ahead. Once he stopped because a man reached toward him, and Samuel had to make himself move again even though the hand stayed in his mind longer than the bullets. He reached the stones near the shingle and rolled against them, shaking so badly that at first he thought he had been hit after all. When Samuel was brought to an aid station later, nobody asked him how courage had felt. Men there had no time for questions that large. They cut straps, checked wounds, gave water, marked tags, and moved to the next body. Samuel had bruises, cuts, a damaged knee, and the stunned look of someone whose mind had not yet reached the place his body had left. When a medic asked where he had been hit, Samuel could not give a clean answer. The beach had hit him. The morning had hit him. The weight of another man had held him down and in a terrible way had helped keep him alive. He tried to say that he had been trapped under the dead, but the words sounded impossible outside the beach. They sounded like something a man would invent if he wanted pity. So he let the sentence die and drank the water he was handed. For the rest of his life, the story did not feel like a victory story to Samuel. Omaha Beach was taken. The landings held. The invasion continued. Men pushed inland, and the road to liberation opened through Normandy at a cost no map could fully show. But for one private lying in the sand, history had not looked like liberation yet. It had looked like a command he gave himself and hated himself for obeying. Stay still. Let the fire pass. Let the beach mistake you for someone already gone. The world later remembered D-Day through courage, sacrifice, and success, and it should. But inside that larger memory were smaller memories that did not fit easily into speeches. Some men survived by charging. Some survived by crawling. Some survived because, for a few awful minutes, they were forced to look dead. If your family has carried a story from the war, or a silence that always seemed to mean something, share it in the comments with the respect it deserves. The men on that beach are often remembered as a generation, but each one crossed that morning alone, one breath at a time.